Hello, my name's Mike Dix. I'm the Media Officer for Hove and Portslade Labour Party. This video is the first in what I hope will be a series of videos where I catch up with Peter Kyle, our local Labour MP, and get his thoughts on various local and national issues. I spent an hour on Friday this week speaking with Peter. He very kindly gave me some time. Unfortunately, he had to use his phone because he wasn't expecting it to be a Zoom call, so I apologise for the video quality in advance. We dealt with a number of issues, and I've decided to break it down into 2 or 3 videos. The first of which is about to follow this introduction, and it's going to touch on issues about working in the local constituency after the David Amess murder, and also quite a relevant issue this week in terms of anti-vax protesting. I hope you enjoy this.
Peter, it's good to see you. I think you were expecting to see me in person. I was expecting to be on a Zoom call, and
it's very disappointing not to see you in person.
Well, this is the next best thing, basically. And in lockdown, this is we should all be used to this. But I'm very grateful for you giving me some of your time. It's interesting, actually, that it's a Friday and you're doing surgery, I assume, today.
Yeah, today actually is a bit of a mixed bag. Every now and then we have a Friday where it's not strict surgeries, but I'm out and about a lot. So this morning I had virtual meetings, which I did from my flat. In a minute, I'm going to have a conversation over lunch with somebody who has a real passion for change in our community here, who wants a detailed conversation. And then I'm doing a few visits. But you know, things change. Unfortunately, I'm not really able to talk about the future in any specific detail on future Fridays. But each Friday is slightly different, and there are some Fridays which are purely surgery appointments face to face in the office. But other Fridays are very different.
I suppose that brings up something that's quite relevant this week in terms of David Amess's very sad murder. You were very close to Joe Cox, I know. Is this something that's affected you? Are you making changes? How's Parliament reacting? How have you reacted?
I've been an MP for 5 or 6 years now, and each year actually has been different to the previous year in terms of how we operate. Sometimes that's just because it evolves, because you get used to the job and you change as you go forward. You adapt to make it more efficient and effective, and to give people more of what they want from you, so you adapt to that. And you can hear the doorbells going here. It's a busy office that I'm in, and that's what I love. It is an intrinsic part of the way that I wanted to do this job, which was to bring politics back to our high street, or to our high street, because it's never been in the high street here in Hove and Portslade before. So being visible, people knowing where I am, where all the work happens, having a shop front whereby even when you're passing, you can look through the window and see that there is people and there's a buzz and where we're active. Well, all of that buzz and activity is on our community's behalf. It's on behalf of residents. And it's really important for me that people can see that and see that side of the work and feel connected to it. So yes, there was a big jolting change after we lost Jo Cox. She was a very good friend of mine. She was somebody I worked very, very closely with as a new MP. And then things changed actually as we went forward, just through personal experience, because there was some pretty nasty stuff that was targeted at me at various points. That does have an impact on the team here as well, because people do feel vulnerable. And the last thing I would ever want is for people who are either volunteering or working for me here to feel in any way, shape or form vulnerable. People do need to be safe, but they also have the right to feel safe at work, and that is incredibly important for me. So there's been a lot of adaptations and changes to the way that we do things, and I'm always open-minded to that, and we as a team constantly talk about these issues, and it's not just when we have a big event like we did the week before last with the loss of David Amess, but it is also something we talk about routinely. Don't forget, we get up to 450 messages every single day, 7 days a week from people. So we detect things, and sometimes there are a few trends.
Not all of them.
Sometimes there are trends in the way that people talk and communicate with us. So we are quite sensitive to what's happening and the strength of feeling in certain areas. And sometimes if that strength of feeling tips over into something which could be threatening in any way, shape or form, then we respond sensibly.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, just to say, have contacted me worried that I'm not going to take it seriously enough, and they're worried about my health. Well, just to those people, thank you so much for thinking of me. That's an inverse thing of what I think my job is, which is to look out for other people. But just to reassure people, I'm not stupid, and I never take knowing risks. You know, I've got a family: my dad, my brother, my nieces, and the people who I have loving friendships with. You know, why would I put them unnecessarily through pain or fear?
Yeah.
So, you know,
personally, I think it's a terrible state we're in when that risk for a politician and their staff is evident. And I think people quite often forget, you know, the staff in David Amos's case, in your case, that a lot of them are volunteers. A lot of them are there to support you, some paid just doing a job. And they're just normal human beings, and the threats and risks to them, I think, are
yes.
terrible. But it would be a terrible thing if your high street presence was lost, because for me personally, when I moved to Hove 6-7 years ago, the first port of call was your office to say, hello, I've moved to Hove.
That just simply won't happen. I mean, I feel so strongly about it that I would rather give up the job than give up the office or give up the high street presence.
Yeah, that's good to know.
I feel that strongly about it. It's so intrinsic to the way that I view my particular approach to politics, and particularly as a community MP, that it's inseparable for me. Yeah, it's inseparable for me. So if there ever was a time when I simply couldn't do that, then I'd rather move on and do something else.
Well, talking of that kind of threat, that kind of potential anger, I guess, basically. I know there's been a lot of anti-vax campaigning outside schools, which is now your shadow ministerial brief to look after schools and young people. And what's happening there? What are you seeing there at the moment? And is it happening in Hove? Are we getting...
There's been anti-vax protesters outside schools up and down the country. There was a report from the Northeast, I think it was, last week, where an anti-vax protester actually grabbed the collar of a young student, an adolescent student, and shouted in his face that if you take the vax, you'll be infertile. Is that what you want? There's two cases in Hove. A case in Hove where anti-vax protesters got onto the bus that was taking students to school and started speaking to students with full of anti-science, anti-fact propaganda, and threatening and harassing students. And there was even a case of one student that asked to be left alone because they didn't want to have this conversation, and the protester carried on. There's another case in another school in Hove where protesters were outside the school gates, which forced students to walk into a very busy main road, to go around them and go through the school gates. The protesters were vocal, they were threatening, and they were endangering students. So let's just be really clear about what these people are. And then I'll talk about what we're doing and the Labour Party has suggested in response. In general terms, not all, I mean, and there's a difference between people who are fearful of needles, fearful of vaccines, who have questions they want answered before they take the vaccine. This is all very normal and is part of the exchange we have with our doctors and our experts in every aspect of our life when it comes to healthcare, and that's very healthy. There is a separate thing here, and that a very separate category, and that is people who are anti-vax, and they are so anti-vax that they take to the streets propagating outright lies that is not based in any norms of scientific understanding or medical understanding, and it is against all of the scientific and medical advice that we as a country and our government has certified on behalf of its citizens. These people are not out of step with people we've seen in a very, very distant past. We as a country went through enlightenment, a period in our time where we shifted from being a society that made decisions at the top based on, in effect, superstition, and moved to a country and a continent that started to base public policy based on scientific understanding. It was a fundamental shift in the way we govern ourselves, and it led to the Industrial Revolution. It led to all of the advances in medical science, the skyrocketing of life expectancy and quality of life and prosperity. This has become the bedrock. Now, these people, these anti-vaxxers who take to the streets propagating falsehoods, they are pre-Enlightenment, and make no doubt about it. There's no doubt in my mind about it. If these people who are standing outside vaccination centres shouting at children, adolescents, and people going to have their vaccine, if those people were alive when Galileo was alive, they would be calling for him to be burnt at the stake, simply for believing that the Earth circles the sun. That is what the tradition these people represent are, and I feel so strongly about it. And we need to protect our children from this sort of thing. Firstly, on the 29th of June last year, before summer, I stood up in the House of Commons and called for adolescents to be offered the vaccine over the summer holiday so that it could be done at school, so that students who wanted to take up the option of having a vaccine, no choice to have the vaccine, anybody who wanted to take up the vaccine could have it done over the summer to mass vaccination centres. But Nadine Zahawi said that in the House of Commons, that children were protected by a wall of vaccinated adults, a complete and utter misreading of the science and public health understanding. At the time, we all knew that. So government didn't offer it to students over the summer. They've chosen to do it in the autumn after school starts, which is why right now we have 211,000 students who are off school. It is a disaster. The economy is recovering. The school system certainly is not. Yeah. So I want to have a protection zone around schools that keep anti-vaxxers away for the duration of the vaccine program. I've spoken a lot to Keir Starmer and Kate Green, who's Shadow Education Secretary. And last week, Keir himself came out and launched a policy whereby it would give freedoms to local authorities, the police, and people leading schools to very, very rapidly, in an instant, instigate an exclusion zone, a protection order around schools for the duration of any vaccine program, so that anti-vax protesters could be kept away. And breaking that zone would automatically be an offence whereby people could be punished. So we've reacted to this. We only have to react to this because government failed to offer the vaccine to young people at an appropriate time. At that point, I stood up in House of Commons, 29th of June. The United States of America had already vaccinated 9 million children aged between 9 and 18. Us, we had vaccinated 0 between 12 plus. So that's the scale of the failings of this government to get this right. And because of that, it has empowered and given space to the very people who are harming our country, the people who don't even believe in science anymore.
It does feel like the government they've been trading off the success of their early vaccinations, which we actually do all applaud. The fact that Oxford came up with something that works. This is no criticism to people or who live with attention deficit syndrome, but unfortunately, we have a government that shares the characteristics of attention deficit. They focus 100% on getting things off the ground, celebrating a big bang launch of doing something the biggest, the greatest, the most expensive that's ever been done before. But then they almost immediately shift attention to something else. Yeah, they are starters. They are not finishers. Well, we've seen that all the way through the pandemic and all the way through the handling of our economy. It's just from a personal perspective. I have leukemia and I've been doing chemotherapy, which is going very well, but it puts me firmly in the shielding and vulnerable list. I'm supposed to be getting a third jab. That's what medical science says. That's almost what the government is saying as well. And that's proving incredibly difficult to organise because it's not coming top down from government because they don't really care. So they've kind of said, well, here's some guidance, sort it out yourselves. So I'm having to educate my own GP on what's needed rather than the other way around.
Yeah.